think we're,
There we go.
do we think we're at a good number and we should start?
I think we're good.
All right. So hi, everybody, and welcome to the debut show of Uncorked History. I am Kelly Pollack. I am a podcaster. I'm also a university administrator, but that's boring. I'm a podcaster and a mom. So if you see kids running around in the background, it's okay. Don't worry about it. And I'm going to turn it over to Jamie, and Jamie will introduce our guest. Hi, Jamie.
Hi. So I am Dr. Jamie Goodall, and I specialize in pirates. So if you want to just refer to me as the pirate lady, I'm totally fine with that.
That's what you are in my house.
It works for me. Tonight, we are honored to have Dr. Holly Pinheiro Jr. Did I say that right?
I was going to say, like, yes, you got it.
I practiced all day.
You got it.
Thank you. He is an assistant professor of African American history in the Department of History at Furman University. His research focuses on the intersectionality of race, gender, and class in the military from about 1850 to the 1930s. So he's published quite a few articles. I've noticed a lot of online articles recently, which have been phenomenal. And he is under contract with the University of Georgia Press for his manuscript, The Family's Civil War. So with that, welcome, Holly.
Thank you. I just want to start by having a drink.
Cheers.
So what are you drinking?
As I'm looking for the box, this is not product placement. I wish I had a deal with them. Makers, if you watch, I am available. So this is, let's see, it's a limited release proof, a 101. It's one of their, I figured since I've never had this is like a special event. You know, I don't even drink that much anymore because I'm like old and I feel it days later. like I'm going to feel this tomorrow. But I just wanted to say, firstly, thank you to everyone that's in attendance, you know, to be able to see people who I'm, you know, friends with and acquaintances with is great. And thank you both for this opportunity. The pets who are world famous are sequestered for my sanity because otherwise they'll take over the show. And that could be
No banana. We only invited you for banana.
So banana right now is angry because it should be dinner number 7. So he's having a protest by the dinner bowl right now. And he just ate 5 minutes ago. So
yeah, I got one of those kind of cats who might come wandering in here at some point too.
I mean, banana might close out the show. You know, I got to keep the audience engaged.
That's true. So Jamie, what are you drinking?
I am drinking a Commodore 64, which is a play on the Commodore number 2, which is apparently from a 1930s cocktail book at the Waldorf Astoria. It's got bourbon, white creme de cacao, lemon juice, orange juice, and grenadine. And it's very interesting. I was afraid it would be terrible because I was like, white chocolatey with bourbon with orange juice. Like that doesn't sound good, but it's actually pretty tasty.
All right, fair enough. And Holly, I didn't ask, you're drinking your straight?
Yeah, I'm just on the rocks. I want to taste it. Like I used to love it. No, I used to be a Crown.
I don't want to taste the bourbon.
So I used to be a Crown and Coke. Actually, I started drinking White Russians because I thought I was going to be the dude for some reason. But yeah, as I've elevated my drinking game, I feel like I'm spending the money you spend on some of these bottles. It's like, I really want to taste it. Though I'm not a hard Scotch person, like some people, because I drink it and I'm like, I don't have the hair on my chest for this.
Yes. So I normally am a wine drinker, but because you were on the show, decided to do bourbon. Sorry, there are dogs barking downstairs. So I didn't have time to go to the store today, so I can only do something that I had ingredients for in my house. So I am drinking something called a Gold Rush, which is, and I'm in my Uncorked History glass, which you can kind of see there.
Are those for sale, by the way?
These ones are not, but we do have merchandise for sale that you can get to from our website. So please stop by uncorkedhistory.com. And the Gold Rush has bourbon, and I couldn't even tell you what kind of bourbon it is. It is the bourbon that has been sitting in my fridge since the last time I thought I should try bourbon. And it has lemon juice and it has honey syrup, which I learned is basically just honey and water mixed together. You heat up the water and add the honey and mix them, and then you have honey syrup. So those were all things in my house. I probably do not have it in the right proportions because it was like 5 till, and I was like, I need a drink, and I ran and poured things quickly. So we'll see.
Cheers.
So well, cheers, everyone.
Cheers to everyone.
Yes, and thank you everyone for joining us.
Yes. I mean, even looking at the audience, we have a who's who. I feel like we should just open up to them at some point, honestly.
It's like the Twitter group.
Right.
So, Holly, we have lots of questions for you, but I'm going to start with one that I know you've been pretty outspoken about, talking about your life and sort of your journey to here. So I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about how you got to where you are, that you're an academic, which is, as someone who fled academia, a tough career.
Right, yeah.
And, and is especially, I think, can be lonely for somebody who's a person of color. So just talk us through, how did you get to where you are?
I mean, that could be like an 8-part miniseries, I feel like.
However long you want to go with that.
Yeah, well, let's see, the abridged version. I've always appreciated history as a kid. Like when I was 8, 9 years old, I was reading either Stephen King novels or Frederick Douglass and Malcolm X. Like my mom was amazing in that she always supported my thirst to read. And like, I love the Bernstein Bears and, Tintin and all that. But after a while, I was like, I want the adult stuff. So it's like I've always been someone that's wanted, like, why is this the case? And I love what we do, right? Engaging in history, because it's like, I tell my students, I get paid to ask questions. Sometimes I have no idea if I'll ever find the answer, but it's like that journey to like trying to navigate that is, to me, really exciting. Let's see, I'm a military brat. My mother served for 25 years in the United States Navy, was born in Virginia, actually raised in Australia, moved a lot of different places. After coming to Greenville, this is the 29th place I've moved to. Went to every year for elementary, I went to a new school, like each year. So like I never had a friend for more than 8, 9 months. So that dislocation and actually when I moved back to the States, they put me in English as a second language because I didn't speak the right kind of English, which is a whole nother conversation. And I'm very salty towards English as a second language because of the what they took, not the people, right? But like that, I lost this. So when I hear an Australian or even a New Zealand accent, I'm like, I used to sound like that. But I think for me, it's like, my journey, and I actually told some of this to my students recently. I think students, they look at professors, educators in general, and assume like, this just happened. And I said, to be clear, like today I did a presentation at Swarthmore College, which is a school I had envisioned when I was in, finishing high school that I'd go to. My family went there, I got rejected. And I say that because like, I was more interested in being popular than doing academics. It was like, I was good at academics, I just didn't care, to be honest. And so when my friends were graduating and going to college, long story short, I was homeless for a number of years. So I was sleeping on couches. I mean, it was, and I take full responsibility for that period of my life because I was lost, and people never gave up on me. So when I did finally go to community college, Valencia College, which is great, I love that school. I never forgot my math teacher, my statistics teacher, Miss McClendon. She's the bomb. I owe her everything because that was a class where I would come to her office and just be like, I'm trying. I don't get like this, but like, and she helped me. Yeah. From there, I went to University of Central Florida, went to the University of Iowa, and people have always seen something in me when I was younger that I never saw in myself. So it's like, I don't take for granted that I have the privilege to talk to y'all, to talk to people about these people who have been marginalized, and that I get paid to do it. Like, yeah. I would do it for free, honestly. Don't tell my boss I said that. But it's like, I love history. I really do. And it's like, I hate when people say, I like history, but, and then there's always the, they insert like can't get jobs, which is not true, or they can't, it's not fun, which I'm like, or it's just memorization. I'm like, in my class, you're going to learn what's the point, what's the bigger significance, right? Like I have biology students staying after class to talk about Abigail Adams' letters to John Adams, in which she's saying that women's rights is now, like during the revolution, right? So it's like, and I'm pushing conversations where students of color, particularly Black students, have said after class, you're saying things in the front of that room that we say privately to our friends and to our family. And you're recentering it on women, you're recentering it on, I'm not saying I'm a Native American scholar, but I at least want to introduce it like they're part of this important history and we need to recognize they matter. All these different people matter beyond the great white men, right? Because even bringing in the problematizing it with the whiteness and how some people weren't white enough. So it's like I love my job. I love when I'm in front of the room. It's like I get the opportunity to perform in some ways. It's like some people like, because I pace a lot. So it's almost, I feel like a lion, just kind of like, ugh. But I'm like, I want you to get, so I'm like, Kelly, what do you think? Right. Because I've dedicated part of my book to my students at the University of Alabama and Augusta University, because I do my teaching in collaboration with my students who influence my research. And I think the one thing I'll end with this. I think that one thing I don't like about people like us on the other side is how we're so quick to like dismiss and talk about our students in these disrespectful ways, on social media, we just mock them. And I'm sitting here like, I was that student y'all are making fun of. I was the student that still writes run-on sentences, still writes fragments. I wasn't, the most privileged student. I was the one working 2 jobs. So when y'all say these things about, oh, well, they're not good enough. Well, we don't know what their living situations were and what led them to that space. Why don't we uplift them? Because Richard Capoe was a professor, and John Stacher, who's got a new book out, were people that went, and Peter Larson at the University of Central Florida, that saw something in me when I didn't. And Capoe, I remember, I don't know, can I curse on this show? I don't. All right. Sure. Capoe said to me one day, and he's like, after class, he's like, you sit in the back of that room and fuck around all day. Like, he's like, I know you know the answers, but you're not trying. And he kept pushing me. And he said one day, have you thought about grad school? And I was like, and I remember saying to him, they don't want someone who looks like me. And I said, I respect you, but you don't know my story. You don't know what it's like to be a person of color. Just like as someone, I'm a gender historian, I have no idea what it's like to be a woman, to be someone of LGBT community. Like I don't, and I never want to say I do, but like there needs to be people from those communities in positions of power who can tell the stories better than I ever can. But if, it's like, I say all that to say, like, we need to uplift our students. We need to uplift people and not just use our titles and all these different things to say we're better than. I've read more than most people, but you put me in a room with some other professors and I feel like the biggest fool in the room, because I usually am.
Full disclosure, my day job, I'm a dean of students. So I am all about advocating for students and I love this. So thank you very much.
Yeah, I mean, I fight all day long for my students. And it's like, because when I'm in the first couple of weeks of this class, I say like, I'm gonna keep it real. I don't care what you get in this class. I don't care. What I care about is you 5 years from today, 10 years from today. Where are you at? Are you employed? What are you doing this job? Some of y'all want to be millionaires, and I hope you do. And I want 10% of your paychecks. But it's like, but I want them to like start to see like what skills from these classes, whether it's anthropology, whatever, they apply, right? Like I still use statistics from Miss McClendon's class. Like she matters in my life. I hope I can see her in the future when it's safe. So I think it's just like empowering students to know like you matter, you have a voice, and I'm going to help you to develop that voice. But also that I will be your biggest cheerleader, right? Like, because I think some students, I needed that, honestly, because being in a classroom with people who were 18 when I was in my mid-20s, who I felt like the biggest failure. Because like all my friends had jobs, right? Like, so that's like, and that's something I still struggle with. Like my imposter syndrome is when people are like, oh, well, I've got this. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about at all. Like, and I'm not saying like, it's just like, I come from a different world. So when I'm talking about social history, it's someone who was at that bottom. I don't do it because it's fascinating. I do it because I live that. Sorry, I talk way too much.
No, you're totally fine. I feel like we had a lot of similar experiences. And so it's great to hear other people have those experiences. And I think it's really important, especially thinking about others who may want to join in our career fields or enter into academia. And so thinking about that and thinking about all the people who inspired you and encouraged you,
Right.
what sort of advice would you give to somebody who, say, wanted to enter academia or wanted to enter the historical profession?
I mean, I think, and I say this because I believe he's in the audience, Christopher Barr. So at my Augusta, where I was at last academic year, I had an entire class where it was, we're going to get you a job. That's the final. Get a job, whether it's or a graduate school, but like what I'm trying to get them to think, what are the skills to learn beyond Augusta when I worked there? So I had people like Adam Downby. I had, Christopher Barr works for National Park Services, who's awesome. I had these different people along the way. I think Angela Riata was there as well, right? Like, so I was trying to get a diverse group of people and Hillary Green to talk about the different experiences with what one can do with a history degree. So for them to hear from Adam Dombey, for example, who's got a book called The False Cause, that you can go into politics, right? But then also Chris was talking about, and he can correct me if I remember this wrong, which I always do, like the pathways, like employment opportunities, right? Like you can get a job right after school. And I'll say this, at the end of that class, 3 students got internships. 1 student got accepted to 4 graduate programs. And others are already having conversations about graduate school. So it's like, for me, like that, I remember I cried at the end of that class because I was so excited, because the final was literally doing a mock interview. And I just sat there and said, talk about yourself for 10 minutes. What skills do you bring to the table for the job you want? And students after the semester were like, I got a job. Thank you. And I'm like, that's what I care about. Like the grades, whatever. You got a job, right? Like, so it's like, and I say that because like, I feel like sometimes I feel like I'm Flavor Flav for my students. You know what I mean? Like, yeah, boy, right? Like, I'm just like, so I want to be that person who uplifts, because I feel like, and I hate the term ivory tower, but like, I'm very privileged that I had people who saw something in me. When I almost dropped out of grad school because personally, I feel like if you don't think of dropping out at least 3 times, you might, like, because there's always factors.
I did drop out.
And like, there was 3 times. It was always financial for me. But then also my friends had families and careers, and I'm living off loans, sleeping on my best friend's couch. And I'm like, I'm 30. What the hell am I doing? And so for me, it was like, how can I help, one, advocating for them never to take out loans, because I don't want them to be like me. My student loans are more than my mortgage and now my rent, right? But then like, how can I uplift these people so that they believe that it's possible? If I can get into grad school, anyone can. And I say this because I am not the smartest. I am not the most eloquent. I think I'm really annoying and obnoxious personally. I mean, I know my limitations, but like, I think what I bring to the table is that I give a shit so much about these people. And so like, when I'm talking about these families, I say my families, like, because I won't say I love them because I don't know them, but it's like, I'm such a deep connection, and it's like, I'm advocating for them. So it's just like, and I think that's something that we on the other side can do, is like, bring that passion. Jamie's work on pirates, which is awesome. Like, you have that passion. First of all, what you do in that subject is going to make me go, what? But then also it's like, you bring that excitement to what you do. To be honest, most times when I get good reviews, it's because they say, I don't like history, but I like the way you teach. You make us care, and you make me seem like I matter. So I'll just throw this tidbit out for people who are on the other side, particularly educators, write notes to your students. So sometimes I'll just write, have you thought about graduate school? I'll leave it at that, because I want, if Kelly was my student, for her to know I see that potential. Yeah. So whether she goes, on her, right? Like that's your choice. But I want you to know that I see it in you. So I always try to use the connections I have. So someone like Amy Morrell Taylor, who I'll go to war for, because Amy, Hillary, and Barbara Gannon are the three people that have been my biggest supporters through graduate school. Like I owe my career to those three scholars. I absolutely love them as people, right? Like not just as scholars, like as human beings, they're absolutely amazing. And like I put them in connection, the students in connection with them to be like, you know, Dr. Taylor is at an amazing program. She'll talk to you about, because I think sometimes students get so scared about like what is graduate school and will the professor, and then you meet someone like Dr. Gannon. Barb is one of the funniest people. If you've never met her, she's amazing, right? And like Barb is as cool as it can be. And like when you talk to her, like if I was a student, I'd be like, I want to work with her. And same like Hillary, I look at Hillary's CV and I feel like I will never reach her level, and I don't want to. But like Hillary is just a very approachable, great human being, right? And it's like, so she's talked to my students about potentially going to University of Alabama to, so it's like they walk away like, if I wanted, I could. Some don't, and that's their choice, but at least they know it's possible. And I think it's possible.
Yeah, you know, it's interesting. My other podcasting world is in politics, and you know, I talk to a lot of women running for office or people training women to run for office, and they say over and over again, women have to be asked like 7 times to run for office before they finally are like, okay, I guess I can do this. Like men, and not all men, of course, but you know, a lot of, you know, sort of white middle class men are just like, yeah, I'm ready, I'll run for office, even though no one is telling me to or asking me to. And I think very much what you're saying, the same thing is true in going to grad school, that you know, if you don't see yourself in the people who are in grad school, who are in the professorate, having someone say to you, have you thought about this? That makes a huge difference.
And I think sometimes it's just, you know, especially right now, Zooming is a little bit more feasible. But when I was in the other side, I remember I sent emails to professors. So one at Florida, one at Vandy, and one at LSU. And I was just like, hey, I would love to talk with you about your grad school programs. Each of those schools flew me out or drove me out to talk with them. I'm having dinner with some of these people who are big names, and I'm sitting here like, whoa. So it's like, once I saw that, like, you know, reaching out to them, and, you know, as academics and just people in general, like anyone's like, hey, I love your work. I'm gonna read that email 3 times. Like, you like my work?
So speaking of your work, can we start talking about your work a little bit?
Oh, yes.
I want to get people hyped about this book that's coming out next year.
Yeah, the book. I check my email every day waiting for like the cover, because I'm like, I don't know what it is yet.
Exciting.
Book, yeah. First of all, I need Jamie's hustle. Like, for real. Like, I say this with all sincerity. Your hustle with your work is like you got what you have, the pillow. What was the other stuff you had? You had
the beer.
I'm just like watching, like, what the hell is that? What do you have? What's the other like advertising you do, which is genius?
I have bookmarks, coffee mugs, stuff like that. Just anything. I have a tote bag with my book cover on it that I take places so that people can see my book cover.
And that's what, like, because okay, I'm gonna keep it real. Like, I talk with Hillary like daily, and these are the things I talk about. I'm like, I need to be like Jamie. Like, because it's like the pillow one to me was perfect, because that's something you can just give to anyone. Like, here you go, mom. Here you go, random person. Here's a pillow. So the book, The Family Civil War, Northern African American Soldiers and the Fight for Racial Justice, will be out next June. Still, it's in production. Let's see, what can I say about it? So this is part of my dissertation. My dissertation was on a comparative study of Northern soldiers born in New York City, at least in the records, and Philadelphia, over a 30-year period to figure out who they were. Because when I read pension records and just Civil War, but in general, any pension record, right? Like, I had imagined they were going to talk about major political like events, right? Like in the case of the Civil War pensions, like 13th, 14th, 15th Amendment. And I remember saying to my advisor, they don't say any of that at all. And I was like, I don't have a dissertation anymore. He's like, what are they saying? And I was like, they're talking about marriage, disability, unemployment, family structure, education, community identity, gender. And she's like, fool, that's your project. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. You're right. But so it's like, and it shifted everything for me because I started to, how much? Sorry, press, if you're listening, I'll try not to give too much of the book away. So the book is looking at Philadelphian-born soldiers. That was the first point from 1850 into the 1930s. But it's the soldiers are the starting point to really get at their families, right? So it looks at a specific number of soldiers from either the 3rd, the 6th, or the 8th United States Colored Infantry. And from this point forward, I'll say USCI. But it's like their service is actually short. You know, it only makes up less than 5 years of their lives. In some cases, less than a year. But it's like, whom were they? And I always joke, but it's almost like the Jerry Seinfeld, like, who are these people? Right? Because it's like, that was my thought of like, okay, we as in general, and I say this of the public, we're all guilty of this, myself included. We look at these pivotal moments as defined and military service, like you were a soldier or you were a sailor or whatever, and now you're a veteran. And those are the labels we put on you. And you lived through the Civil War era, or you lived through Jim Crow. And I'm sitting here like, no, they were, in this case, they were sons, brothers, grandfathers, like they're people. And they had hopes, dreams, fears, failures, and successes and joys. And that's the bigger story. And that totally giving away my introduction. The Civil War did not or Reconstruction or whatever did not define these people's lives. They defined those moments. And that the Civil War is part of a larger race war that every Black person was born into, that they never asked to be a part of, and that their persistence in the fight against racial discrimination, gender discrimination, all these different layers, that's the bigger story. Because as I tell my students, I'm gonna keep it real, I would have given up. Because I would have just been like, I can't do it. Like, it's too much. And yet these people don't. It's that their persistence, their demands to be remembered. So going off of people like Barbara Gannon and David Blight and Adam Dombey, who have pushed conversations to debunk the lost cause. I'm arguing what's called the family's cause. And I'm putting my work in conversation. And if y'all haven't read these books, you should get them because they're amazing. So Brandy Brimmer, she has a book called Claiming Union Widowhood. We had Tara Hunter, Chandra Manning, so many other scholars. And I'm sorry if I forgot you. I'm not trying to cause drama. But like, I'm putting my work in conversation with this bigger scholarship about that families were fighting to be heard, right? But I'm also trying to shift the point of saying, and there is a reason for a long time we have been hyper-focused on the freed experience. And as many people know, first of all, I want to be clear, should continue to understand their stories. They are very important, but they are not the Black experience. Slavery is not the Black experience, right? But by hyper-focusing on the freed families, freed people, we lose sight of free-born people. And usually when people talk about USCT in the North, they look at the 54th Massachusetts. They don't even look at the 55th. But what gets lost is hundreds of thousands of other people, right? My advisor, Leslie Schwam, looked at the 60th USCI from Iowa, for example. There's so many other, and their stories all matter. And I'm saying, what about freeborn people in a place like Philadelphia, which has a rich history in terms of just abolitionism, women's rights, Civil War, military service and wartime mobilization, but also has a messy history. And also even the connection to the Black religious connections, if we're talking the African Methodist Episcopal Church or the AME, right? And that actually does connect in many ways to these families. But there's also racial violence, large scale race riots, but also small scale day to day. So it's like looking at those, we get a bigger, more nuanced story about issues of why men deserted, I'm so tired. I realize this is going to open a can of worms, but fuck it. Like, fuck. I'm so tired of when people are so dismissive, or they say it like these men were cowards for deserting, right? Or they'll say like whatever gendered, and usually they're trying to demasculate or disrespect men in general, like for deserting, and not taking into account a number of Northern Black soldiers aren't paid for 9 months. Some don't get bounties, or they're dealing with racial discrimination, and you have their families that are begging them to come home. So do they have to be a man in uniform to a country that is continuing to perpetuate racial and gender discrimination? Or is it more concerned about taking care of those families at home? Because for me, it's about those families. And the letters are very clear. They're begging, come home. This is not the war for you. We need you. So by putting it more personalized, it makes it more richer. I'm trying also to influence or to push conversations. Drew Gilpin-Faust, who I love, with the Republic of Suffering. She does a phenomenal job of talking about. Also, Allison Johnson has a book that's called like Scars We Carve, about the invisible bullet and the good death, which I teach a lot about, the good death. And I see that script playing out in the pension records. But what I'm trying to say is, first of all, is when Drew Gilpin-Faust talks about the good death, it doesn't talk, she doesn't talk about what does it mean for men to mourn the loss of a brother, of a father, of a son, of a cousin, of a friend. So there is something I'm unpacking, but then also that mourning, in a weird, sad way, becomes actually a way for Black people to be part of this national identity. Because mourning and death transcends race, class, religion, especially during this period of time. And that the invisible bullet, as Allison Johnson points out, basically the short version is when someone gets news of a death, they are hit either with that emotional, psychological, sometimes physical ramifications. That happens to these families. But also, what does it mean for these families as they're training, as the men are training? And it totally spoiled my book, and I realized my press is probably going to hate my guts. Oh, well. So the book opens up with a statement that I remember reading that I couldn't believe. Thank you, Brad. Mary Leighton. So you'll see if you read Embattled Freedom by Amy Morrell Taylor. That book won so much money. And I always joke, I'm like, Amy, can I get like $5? But like, Amy does a phenomenal job of tracking families. And I remember saying to Hillary when Amy was getting one of her many book prizes, I whispered to her, I was like, I want to be just like her. Because it was like, and that was why I chose to go with UGA Press, because like I've always been a huge fan of her work. But Amy gets it. Amy gets that it's about the people. It's not about Reconstruction. It's not like, it's people. So for me, what I saw and trying to, in some ways, do what she does is trace families. So Benjamin Davis's family is one of those 185 families that I study. And the book opens up with his common law wife, Mary Leighton, who says in 1884 to a pension agent, I'm paraphrasing, "The United States Army took away my husband and destroyed my family, and we've gained nothing." And I sat with that for weeks, because what she's testifying goes against everything that I had been talking about. I'm like, damn, she ain't talking about the glory. She's talking about war destroyed her family. And I'll just say that like their family is traced throughout the book. The story is horrific, what happens to them. And to be clear, they're connected to the 54th Massachusetts Volunteer Infantry, right? So they're part of that glorious story. But I promise you, the story is not glorious. But what is beautiful is their persistence, that she's like, damn it, you're going to remember and you're going to hear what this war did to me, what you, federal government, took from us. And there, I mean, so it's like, I'm trying to really make the Civil War more personal for free-born Black families. Mm-hmm. Because I think for so long, totally ruining the introduction, Civil Wars, in my opinion, Civil War
You give away
scholarship.
the intro and then everyone wants to read the rest of it.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to give. Normally, I
That's
give
the
away
hustle.
I give away the prologue usually, but I'm gonna keep it. But I will say my book ends with a daughter and Eleanor Roosevelt talking about Black military service, and it's absolutely amazing.
Oh, I can't
And
wait to read that.
and I'll just say this: I have a whole new respect for Eleanor when I read it because she was like, "I want an answer now," and guess what? She gets it. So Eleanor is very much connected to Civil War military service memory, which is something I've never seen anyone say. And
Yeah.
again, that's why the pensions are phenomenal. Totally forgot where I was going.
Should we see if audience wants to ask any questions?
Yeah, that's probably better.
Let's do that. Let's see. And if they don't, I'll just keep peppering you with questions. And I know Jamie has lots too. So, but certainly if the audience has any questions, we don't need to do a Q&A or anything formal. Just put them in the chat and we will find out. So Victor asks Holly, what was the most surprising thing you found out in researching your book?
A lot. I'd say the one that I struggled with the most was domestic violence. And I say that as someone who was a child that lived through that. And this is something I really struggled with, like, how do I address this? And I'm saying personally, and then also as a scholar, like on one layer, these are people who are playing a pivotal role in ending slavery and defeating the Confederacy and changing American society, right? Like, and it's like absolutely amazing. But then to see Wilson Day, who will beat his wife so regularly, and I'm sorry, I do not want to cause trauma to anyone, but I'm just speaking from this historical event, is that the neighborhood would literally take out a neighborhood watch because they would hear screams of violence from him on her. He would also attempt to burn his children's ears on a stove. They would put him into an Blockley almhouse, which is essentially like an insane asylum. He will die in an attic with immigrant white men. And there's a whole thing which I unpack there. And it's like, to me, when people say things like, we're talking about the public memory of the Civil War, this man dies like an animal in an attic with other men. And I used to call my mom crying when I would read the pension records. Because it hurts me, because I'm like, when I do history, particularly Black history, gender history, I want to feel something. And usually what I feel is like a wave of emotions. And the thing that ripped my soul apart was that the Blockley Almhouse records openly stated, and I'm paraphrasing, if there's not a homicide every day amongst the patients, the staff is surprised. And he will go missing and die. And it's like, and I, again, like, there's so many layers to this story, but that the what we know as PTSD, right? The domestic component, violence. And it's like, I'm also pointing out that this family is in a war for survival against a veteran. So the war comes home in a way nobody anticipated. And I really struggle with that, because it's like, it hurts. I mean, personally, to write that, to have to process it, to have to talk about it. But then also, I'll just close with this, is that I know way too much about women's personal lives and intimate spaces. It's none of my business. And I really struggled with that as well. Like, how do I talk about the racialized gender discrimination that Black women are facing as a committee of a Bureau of Pension agents are demanding that one of these women that's in the book will have to tell her first sexual experience because she had a child outside of wedlock. And on one layer, I really struggled with it, because I was like, I do not need to know 17 pages about her life like that. But I also flipped it and said, she's like, you want to know? I'm going to tell you. And her matter-of-fact way she closes it to me was empowering. She's like, and that's all there is to say about that. I don't want to say anything else. And to me, it was like, she flipped the script, if you will, on that interview. And she's like, I'm going to make this awkward for you, panel. You want to know? I'm going to tell you. But it's like I struggle with, how much do I disclose about their personal lives? Like, there's some things I kept out, because I'm just like, I don't need people. I don't know. Anyway, whatever. It's hard to do this kind of work.
I can't even imagine. I mean, working on pirates is a vastly different thing than working on, racialized history. I mean, it's so far removed in a lot of ways because of the romanticization. So it's like, I don't think about those things when I'm doing my research that often. So I can't imagine. Sammy has a question. Yes. What got you interested in the American Civil War?
First off, thank you, Sammy, because he's across the pond. Let's see. The sad, well, not sad, the honest truth, the film Glory. So yeah, like on one layer, I can't stand that film because it's like the fact that there's only glory. So one of my bigger end games, and to keep it real, is that I want, and I'm not saying even of myself, you got, at my office, books of scholars who have done phenomenal, groundbreaking work on Civil War and public, Civil War memory scholarship. Why hasn't there been a Glory 2, right? Like, or something, right? Like, or it's just like, even talking with, Chris about, the National Park Services connection, there's so much that was left out of that story. But at the same time, I love Glory. I can quote it word for word, which is really sad. But it's like, here's the thing. If you watch Glory and you read my book, it'll be very obvious to you that I love that film. I will say that I'm starting work on my second project, which is going to look at all Black Pennsylvanian soldiers that will train at Camp William Penn, which is actually connected to Lucretia Mott, because she will donate her family's land. She'll visit there like pretty regularly. And so, and Jonathan White, who does some great work on this, and many others, right? Like, I'm trying to argue, totally going to ruin this, that the battle for Black people to make it to train at Camp William Penn was a fight in itself. And that fight connects to people like Judy Giesberg talking about that Black women are going to be fighting to get on public transit to safely move to that. But I want to make this bigger argument about, while this training is happening, that Black people in Pennsylvania are actually they're forcing themselves into the national family. Right? Because that rhetoric is there, right? Like this brother against brother crap that some people point when they talk about the Civil War. It's like people are using this rhetoric of like, it's very family affair. So what if we connected that Black people are saying we are part of this war? And, one of the snippets I'll talk about is that Black civilians get married at Camp William Penn. I still am trying to process why that happened. Because it's like, there's like, and I say this as a military brat, like, that shouldn't have happened. But then also, it's like, if you watch Glory, that scene when they do the military dress parade through the downtown of, I believe it's Boston, like, I still cry. Like, my wife, and I think I live tweeted me watching Glory, which was just like, and there's like certain scenes I'm like, all right, y'all, I'm going to start crying, so I'll be back in a minute. Because it's like, if you watch the parade, there's so much to unpack there. You have children that were there. You have women that were visibly demonstrating themselves to be part of this. And one thing which I've talked about in one of the blog pieces for Black Perspectives, and will be critical to the second book, is I'm so tired of people ignoring Black women's importance to the Civil War in the North. They were always important. Soldiers write about them constantly. They were pivotal to nursing. They were pivotal to the regimental. They were always involved, but we're so dismissive of Black women's role. And it pisses me off because it's like, we have privileged white women's role. Nina Silver, for example, has done a great job talking, and I love her work. But it's like, what about Black women? We know about Susie King Taylor in the South. There are so many Black women in the North who are doing very important things, and the soldiers have constantly written about it. But yet, why aren't they the centerpiece of the study? So long story short, Glory. But then also, I'll connect it back to my personal story. I'm the child of someone who served. And, when I thought about going to grad school, initially, I thought I was going to do, I was either going to be prohibition history because I was really interested in like race in terms of like, crime and all that, like during that period. And then I was going to do Japanese samurai history. So I was like, part of it was like, I didn't want to do Black Civil War history because like people would say, of course you would. But I realized I kept gravitating back to that because I heard about the Dunning School, which I won't bore readers with or audience with, but basically like the very racist interpretation of history, of American history. And I was just like, oh, fuck that. Like, no. And I've always been very passionate about, I want to make history more personal. Like if I'm studying Kelly and Jamie and your decision to make this podcast, who is your family? What are the decisions that they do in supporting you? Like, because you're never doing this in isolation. And that's the thing is like scholars, we know this. Richard M. Reed writes about this. He says that like the decision to serve was always a family decision. So why isn't that the centerpiece of the book?
Yeah.
And I say that I love his work. Don't want to make enemies.
So speaking of to everyone, shout out to my husband who's watching the kids so that I can do this. Yes, this is very much a family thing.
Yeah, no, and that's important. Is like we need to understand that what we and what they and people do is never in isolation, right? Like I'm doing a class on roots next semester, and students can either do a family history of themselves or a famous person. So for example, I say, if you chose Rosa Parks, just throwing out a person, I said, put Rosa in context with her parents, her grandparents, and her great. She probably comes from a rich history that like, she didn't just come to this, like realize it, right? For example. So I think, and then it makes you appreciate what she did even more. And I think that's just me as a scholar. I want to make people care about people, which is dumb. I think this is whatever.
No, I think that's great. I mean, being in a military marriage, a lot of times, like I'm sort of ignored in terms of like, they'll ask, oh, your husband's re-enlisting. What do you think about that? And it's like, well, we decided that together. Exactly. You know, it wasn't his decision. It was our decision because it affects both of us. So, and, you know, I think for a lot of people, they don't think about how that operates on a day-to-day basis.
Well, even when people say, and I'm sure you've seen it, they say thank you for your service, and they're looking towards them. And as a kid, I was like, hello, or look to my grandmother, right? Because when my mom got deployed, I was shipped to live with a relative. First of all, I love my mom, right? Like I want to be clear on it. But like as a kid, there was a resentment. I hated the United States, to be honest, because I always felt they stole my mother from creating these bonds with me that like we have a great relationship now. To be honest, the other thing I love about grad school is it made me appreciate her as a woman. It made me appreciate her as a veteran, like her in more totality than I had ever thought before. But as her child, when she would get deployed, I hated the United States military and government because I'm seeing she's gone. And now I got to live with grandma. And that's a transition and like all that. And I love my grandma, but still it's like I'm being uprooted for she's deployed. And then she comes home and I'm like, who are you, lady? Grandma runs the house. You don't run the house.
So we got a question in the Q&A from Eric who asked this phrase that you said, this isn't the war for you, you know, that there's some parallels there with the Vietnam era and the Vietnam experience. Have you seen those parallels in your work? Have you come across comparisons at all?
So I do not study, like modern history scares me. It's not because it's like, I'm always like, ooh, I don't know this. I'll say this. When I do presentations, the people whom I've had the privilege of talking to, so I've talked to when I was at the University of Georgia, I presented, and there was one gentleman that was a Vietnam vet one day and another a different day. And then I also had a student at the University of Alabama who had served during the Iraqi freedom period. And they were like, and also my old neighbor who served recently, they were like, you get it. You get us. And these are people, white, black, like they're, you know, different groups that are like, and actually at my current job, I've been trying to develop a relationship with a lieutenant colonel to talk with her about connecting with the ROTC program. Cause even she's like, you understand what we experience. You understand the struggle when we get deployed, that we're never doing this alone, that we're always thinking about our families, our communities. We're trying to, whether it's our children, our mother, and I think that's because I lived that it's like I will never forget. And I think I posted it on Twitter like once. There was a gentleman who came up and he shook my hand. This is pre-COVID, I want to be clear. Shook my hand and cried. This dude's a Vietnam vet. And I'm just like, I gave him the space and he said, yeah. Thank you. Thank you, because he said, I see myself in these people you talk about 100 plus years removed. You're talking about my frustrations with the VA, with the pensions, with feeling like my story matters. And he's like, I'm not saying that I'm the same as these people, but you get it. And it's like, I tell people all the time, like, there's some people, they do the work and they win all the awards. Sorry, I'm trying not to cry. Like, they win all these awards. And these are people like I'm friends with and I love, and I'm grateful. Like, I love seeing good scholarship win awards, as it should. I'll probably, and Hillary, I've talked about this a lot. Hillary's like, and I love her. And she's like one of these people that like I trust completely. She's like, you may never win any award. But the fact that, and I've come to terms with that, because like, for example, I've been dismissed throughout most of my career, and then my research is not legitimate. It's Black history, but it's not Civil War history, right? Like, that's a whole nother conversation. But my end game for the first book is post-COVID, if that, God willing, ever happens, is to go into those communities and to talk to those families and to do a presentation. And my prayer is that somebody walks up to me and is like, even though I don't agree with everything you're saying, you've made me and my family the centerpiece of a study, and you're presenting this work, and I will talk any damn where about these families, because like, they fucking matter. I don't do like, and I always have to be clear on this, I don't do this work for accolades. I don't give a shit. Like, I don't, like, I'm never whatever. But if you walk away knowing that Mary Leighton matters just as much as Benjamin Davis, her husband, and that Jerome, their child, is they're the story, I've done my damn job. Because that's why I do this. If I was doing modern history, which I never will, like, Jamie would be the story as well as her husband. It would never just be. And it's like, and military families understand that I'm always trying to be more inclusive, because I'm gonna keep it real, traditional, and I hate that word. Military history, particularly with Civil War, is not always inclusive. Not, whether we're like racial, but definitely families. Home front is always separated. Fuck that. It's all together. And I'm so tired of people not acknowledging that these veterans, that these soldiers, that these families had emotions and dreams. And like, it's just like, I don't think what I'm doing is that profound. I really don't. I just like, I'm taking my personal angst and frustrations and whatever and applying it to these people. That's it. And that's why I say to students, like, I don't do anything groundbreaking. But like, I don't think so. I'm just like, this is what I experienced. Here's what they experienced. That's it. Why it shouldn't be that groundbreaking to talk about a family.
It shouldn't be, but I think it is.
That's something I will always struggle with personally. Sorry, I'm kicking my table. It's just like, I don't think, like, Thavalia Glymph, that's how I knew I was, for me, like, people, Nobel Peace Prize, whatever, Pulitzer, they're like, oh, Thavalia Glymph sat in front of when I did a presentation and gave me a head nod and walked out. I was like, I don't give a shit about anything else in my career. She respected me, right? And like, so I always brag about that. I'm like, I wish that was my blurb. So why Glenn thought it was good. But it's like, that's like that. because I like, and when I did that presentation, it was about talking about Black women and their prominent, important role, because that's what the soldiers are saying. So I'm taking the words of the veterans who become historians, and they say Black women matter, our families matter. The only difference is they were fighting a war to be remembered in the public discourse in history. And I'm saying, y'all dedicate your books to these women, but you don't make them the centerpiece of the study. And I understand why they do that. I'm just trying to say the family is the story.
All right. Well, we could probably keep talking about this all night, but we know you have to teach tomorrow. And
I mean, I got a little bit of time. We're good.
Well, we can also, of course, continue this conversation on Unsung History, my other podcast that Holly will join me on in the spring, closer to the time that the book comes out. Yes, this is all very much the kind of stuff that I am always trying to highlight, that I think is, I made a joke once. Somebody asked what Unsung History was going to be about before I started it, and I said, "Well, I want to know what people ate for lunch in Kansas in 1910. Like, I want to know these little details that don't come out, and these stories that just aren't brought to the surface as much. People know them. It's not like nobody knows them. They're there. Right. But we just if we dig a little deeper and sort of bring them center them, as you were saying, center them the way that can and we should. So I am so excited to read your book, and I think now that everyone is.
Yeah.
So I was just gonna say, like, I love, the one thing I do love about social media, like, and it's it has a lot of problems, let's keep it real, is that to be able to connect with and read and make friends with so many different types of scholars, like, and I say this, I want to be as clear as I can to those who are in graduate school. There were a lot of times where I felt like my work, and I was told very bluntly, not by anyone in my program, but it was when I would do presentations, that my work didn't matter. And it was very dismissed. And I've had people, when I would go into the Civil War circuit, which is always problematic sometimes, who would be very dismissive. And I want to say this to graduate students, the undergraduates, junior scholars: your work matters. You don't always have to talk about this happened at this ridge at this point. Like, it's okay to, like Kelly was saying, to like talk about and I hate saying humanize, but like it's weird that that's what we're doing. Like, right, we're talking about, like, maybe before a person went on the ridge, they got a letter from home that like wrecked them emotionally, and that's why that attack didn't work out like we thought it would, right? But if we put into context, the home front and the front line are in direct and deep conversation. Mm-hmm. Excuse me, you tell I'm tipsy. We get a better story. I think the one thing for me that I really struggle with is, and I see this on social and just in general, because and this is something that hurts for me, is like, there's some great scholars out there, like, and academia sucks. Like, I'm just keeping it real. A lot of problems with it. There's some great scholars. Like, today I was hyped that I found 10 dissertations that I can use for my second book. First of all, like, thank you to like y'all. Even if you never publish something, I'm reading it. And that there are amazing junior scholars, or soon to be, undergrad, like, doing phenomenal work. It's not just the tenured professor in an endowed chair that you need to read. No, screw that. I read master's theses. I won't embarrass them, but I have like former students and current students that are amazing, absolutely amazing. And I think, like, I wish there needs to be platforms to promote junior scholars, graduate students, even undergrads, because those are things I believe in, is like, we need to not think that, and I'm always clear on this, what I'm saying should not be the end. What Amy, what Hillary, what all these other, no, screw that. I recognize that I have limits on what I focused on.
Yeah.
So why can't my student say, actually, you didn't talk about this? And they'd be right. Like, trust me, there's a couple of things in my book I'm like, I didn't want to go there. And that's fine. But I think like we need to be more inclusive in scholarship and recognize that there's some great work out there. Because I think sometimes what gets lost is the up and coming, like, yes, trust me, we need more jobs. We need more opportunities for people. There's some innovative work out there. Like, people talk about my work is innovative. And then I'm like seeing people out there who are like way more impressive in what they have idea wise. Because I read a lot of English scholars. I read a lot of, I don't just read historians. I'm an intersectional scholar. So I'm always like Robin D.G. Kelly and intersectionality with what is and for politics is as a term I use. Benedict Anderson in Magic Communities. I've even gotten into some scholarship focus on death, and it's just like, because it's like sometimes it's fun to go down the theoretical rabbit hole and move beyond traditional subfield scholars. Like for me, the fact that I'm reading like English scholars who do great work on Black newspapers, but they reshaped how I think about conversations about the Black press during the Civil War. And I'll just say this to those doing and interested in learning more about Black military service: read Black newspapers. And here's why. So the pension records, which I use for my book, are phenomenal. I cross-reference that with the federal census, which is absolutely dry, but phenomenal, because that's how I learned about their living situations. And more importantly, I learned about the women in their lives. For example, that a number of mothers were successful businesswomen, owned real estate, and did not need men at all, which I then used to talk about issues of gender. Also, that some of these homes were interracial. Some of these homes, they were complex homes, that some of the future Black soldiers lived with white families, which, if you know anything about Philadelphia's history with racial violence, is really fascinating. Yeah. But then also the Black press, and I'm talking about the Christian Recorder and the Weekly Anglo-African in this case, Black soldiers, and many of y'all probably know this already, they write in those newspapers about issues of pay, racism, like all this stuff. And they're writing in like very nuanced ways. So I think that's something. It's like, look, there's so many sources out there to do even more innovative work than I've done. Yeah, because anyway. I'm always excited when there's new USCT African related history.
So you gave us a nice entree to say that you should check out the schedule for our episodes throughout. We're booked through like June at this point, I think. So
yeah,
check it out. It's pretty exciting. And we're not going to be talking just to history professors. We have a whole range of different kinds of scholars we're going to talk to. Next week on the show will be Ben Railton. Ben is an English professor who does some studies, does some really interesting things with patriotism. I think everyone will find fascinating. And we're going to start doing some pairings between scholars and alcohol industry experts. So next week, joining us on the show will be Philip from Twisted Cedar, which is a winery, a tribal-owned winery, and we are super excited to talk to him. So we're going to throw people together. It's going to be kind of like, late night shows where we're like, okay, scoot down the guest. Now we're going to talk to the next guest and we'll talk to each other. So I am super excited about everything that we have planned. And I hope that people will join us. Will keep joining us. And I'm super grateful to Jamie for having suggested that we do this.
Yeah, well, I am grateful for you, and I am most grateful today for Holly. That was phenomenal. I could talk to you for hours.
I feel bad because after I'm like, I should be quiet. Honestly, I'll just say thank y'all. Like, first of all, now actually, this is the first time I've talked to Jamie virtually. And like I said, if you don't follow Jamie, shame on you. That's a whole nother thing. But her marketing game and also the Uncorked glass, I'm going to need to figure out how to get, like, y'all are, I need to be on your level in terms of like getting more marketing for the product. I mean, and okay, I'll just close with this. Junior scholars, as you're negotiating your contracts, start thinking about long term. So what I mean is, like, I've written my book with the hopes of it being either a mini series or a movie. So when you negotiate those terms, ask questions about movie rights, TV rights, things like that. And I say this because no one has ever talked to me about that stuff. Mm-hmm. Have that conversation. And I'm trying to be as transparent as I can, because we're in an age of streaming, right? Where like and people are doing phenomenal work, and it would be awesome. I would love to see y'all's work on any of these platforms, but like, put it into your contract, so that way you can get either full ownership or at least like enough to where you're making some money. Because I think that's the great thing about what we're doing too, is like, there's so many platforms hungry for content. I've written my book, honestly, with the idea of pitching it to some production company, because I'm tired of glory, and I love glory, but I'm tired of glory.
You should also think about writing kids' books.
I mean, I'm not Erica Dunbar, like, I'm not that good, like, but I know, like, I wish.
And I will say to the young scholars out there that, as someone who gets a lot of pitches from PR people, that academics have PR people too. Not all of them, but some of them certainly do. And the ones that you see everywhere who are on MSNBC and everything, they have PR people. They are not just pitching themselves or just waiting for the phone to ring and it's MSNBC.
Or like, just follow people like Jamie and Keisha Blaine and some of these scholars. I'm like, how do y'all do that? Because it's like, sometimes it's for me, I just like, I feel like I'm in the shadows watching, like, okay, that's what you're doing. Okay, all right. But it's like, I think this is important for, as you know, and I say this as still a junior scholar. This is a big problem, I think, with the profession, is there's not a lot of transparency and support, right? Like, on how to navigate. Like, I'm gonna keep it real. Like, when Jamie followed me, that was like a big coup for me, because I didn't know her, but it was just like, you know, she's got this huge following. She does this amazing work, and she's really good at marketing herself, right? Like, and then like to meet all these other scholars as well, that I'm just like, wow. And I think for graduate students, those who are, you know, in the aren't tenured, or, you know, navigating that, is just like how to get yourself seen. Mm-hmm. And I'll just close with this, and this was some advice a friend of mine gave me. And on one level, it was super brutal, but I look back and he was right. I remember my friend was like, nobody cares about you. You've got to hustle. You know, you got to be out there just like doing it and making yourself seen, and people knowing about you. And I take that mentality, like, I'm out there on the corner, right? Just like, yo, here's my work. You're going to like it or whatever. And it's like, and that, when he was that honest about it, I was like, damn. And I say that because, like, I will do my best to help any of y'all that I can, but I know my limits. Like, but having said that, like, you know, junior scholars, you know, don't hesitate to reach out if you want a platform to do an invited talk, because that's something that I was grateful that I got when I was on the other side. Or if you just want someone to read your work, I am a co-series editor on Black Military Service with UVA Press. I would happily take your stuff. Like, I want to help people to get their work out there, to get jobs. And whatever you want out of what you're doing with that career, because everyone's different, right? Like, but I want to help others, because I know I wouldn't be where I am right now without the support of people.
Yeah. Well, that is a lovely place to wrap up, I think.
Yeah. So we will be posting this to YouTube, and in the show notes, I'll have all of Holly's information, so you can reach out to him. I'll have our information, and hopefully you guys will check it out.
Thank you so much.
Good night, guys. Cheers, everyone.